Hi everyone, Evan Alexander here. Thanks for joining me in the second part of this series. Today I want to talk about non-destructive workflows and modular workflows, which will not only improve your renderings, but make your life a lot easier. As we looked at in the first series, sometimes we develop these projects over a long time and have to do a lot of different revisions and a lot of different variations and design development. And so if we work non-destructively and if we work in a modular fashion, we can make doing this so much easier and faster for ourselves. And so the work will be better and it'll be more efficient and you might just have a life. So let's jump in and take a look. So here's a render from Cinema 4D with Corona, and I've brought it into Photoshop, and I've done all of my post-processing work on it. And I've done it in such a way that it's non-destructive, so we're not touching the actual render layer at all, and everything else, even the adjustments to it, are happening non-destructively. So in the future, when we do revisions, we can easily just slip a new render into this system and everything is going to stay the same. Because what I don't want to have to do is kind of rework and re-guess on the tonality and the kind of color balance and those things. Everybody loves those on this image. It's just maybe part of the scenery that's changing. And so we want to be able to have this system in place when these revisions come up. So it all starts here. I'll just turn all this off. So this is the raw render. This is what comes directly out of Cinema 4D. And the first thing that I do is I make it into a smart object. And then I've done some camera raw filtering on here. And so this now becomes part of this smart system. So when I bring in a new render, I'll be able to move all of this right onto the new layer. And so I don't have to rework the values. I don't have to guess. I don't have to do any thinking about it. And then everything will stay the same, no matter what layer we kind of put this on. I have my adjustments in here. Same thing. I'm doing these non-destructively using adjustment layers. So we've got our statue color here. It's just a hue saturation adjustment layer that's giving it a bit of this kind of bronze kind of patina on here. It's kind of purpley. And then there's this painting in the back that was looking just a little hot. So this has, I think, maybe just a little desaturation on it. And then there's this third one called general darkening, which is a little vaguer. This is a levels adjustment, but I've painted in where I want these levels to be. And I'll show you how to do that. And then the other layers in here are kind of more straightforward. So I've added some koi fish, and this is just using standard layers with blending modes to get this stuff to kind of fit in. I'm used generative fill here. So I've used the AI inside of Photoshop to help me kind of cover up some of the, you can see here, I've got some like repeating pattern in the texture from the 3D. So generative fill is a great way to help get rid of some of that stuff. I've also added in this little like power box here. So just a little detail that I added in. I've got water stains at the top. Again, just standard layers set to different blending modes to get this stuff to sit in. And then I also enhanced the sky a little bit. And this is a little different in that it's a folder, and I've put the mask on the folder. And so now anything that I put inside of this folder will be limited to this mask. And this is great. This image just has, a straightforward JPEG and some adjustment to it. But you can build and stack more and more layers in here. And so like when I'm building video walls for concert renders, I'll do this a lot where I actually build the image in layers inside of the folder that's masked just to the area of the render that I want. So that's kind of great. And then finally on top here, I just have what's called a color lookup adjustment layer. This is a LUT, a lookup table. And this is just kind of a pre-described kind of toning algorithm that gets applied to this to help me kind of tint this the way that I want. So that's a fancy way of saying it's like an Instagram filter. So let's look at some of these components here and how we would kind of set them up. I have a copy here of the raw render. So let's just start over. So again, this is where we would start with the output from the 3D program. So I'm going to right click on this and I'm going to choose Convert to Smart Object. And when I do this, you can see the icon here changes a little bit. So now if I do filtering, and I'm going to come back here to Camera Raw Filter, and this is going to open up a second window. And so now I can do all of my adjustment work inside of here. So we want to definitely cool off the temperature a little bit and maybe bump the overall kind of vibrancy and saturation down a little bit. I'm going to beef up the exposure a little bit. I'm not going to spend all the time here to kind of really dial this in because this could go on and on. But you would definitely want to come in here and kind of set this to taste. Let's say this is great. And then I say, okay. And now you can see that it's added this kind of smart filters and it started to stack up the layers. So I can move this now onto other layers if I need to when we start dealing with revisions. And that's great. We love that. The other thing that's really nice about this is this always lets you get back to your filtering. So if you just did the camera raw directly to the image, it would destructively change the image, and then you wouldn't be able to go back and modifying it without kind of reapplying that whole step again. So this lets us double click on this at any point and come back in here and kind of tweak this stuff. So maybe I made it too cool. I can just come back and readjust at any time and get things kind of set up the way that we want. So let's go back. I'm going to go back to our original here. So I'm just going to delete this layer here. And then the other thing I wanted to show you was this idea of the general darkening layer here. So I do this a lot when I want to kind of paint in level adjustments without it just happening kind of globally to the whole document. So here's what I do. I'll just turn this guy off. So I'm going to make a new levels adjustment. And by default, the mask for the level adjustment is all white, meaning anything that we do here is going to happen globally to the whole image. So I'm going to over crank this just so you can really see it on YouTube, because this one is extremely subtle. So let's pretend like we're really, I don't know, it's the nuclear holocaust here, and we're going to really just darken this out. So everything here is all white, so it's happening everywhere. But we want to be able to kind of paint in where we want this. So what I'm going to do is select the mask, and I'm going to hit Alt and Backspace. And what that's going to do is it's going to fill, oop, I lied, it's Control Backspace, sorry. Control Backspace will fill in with my background color, which is black. So now I've changed the mask here to black, meaning it's not going to appear anywhere in the image. But I have the level set up where I want it. And so now I can just grab a brush. I can use white to paint in where I want it, and I can play with the opacity. And now anywhere I paint, I'm going to be able to apply this levels to it. And I can switch back to black and get rid of it if it's not, you know, I want to clean it up. And I also have the flexibility of just adjusting the actual levels still to kind of make it what I want. So this is a great way to non-destructively go through and kind of darken things down or brighten things up. So if you are used to using the burn and dodge tools, which happen, you know, kind of directly on the layer, that's great, but it's happening destructively. And so this is going to give you a way to kind of play around with that and paint in these specific areas where you want it. So we love that. So I have everything set up here, but now we want to make a revision. So everything's looking good. Everybody loves the tone. They love the kind of general vibe of the rendering. But the production designer has said, well, now we need to change out the statue. So, okay, no problem. So I've gone ahead and I've already rendered out a new scene from Cinema with this new Henry Moore statue in it. So I just have the render, and I've also done an ID pass, which we'll talk about in a minute in Corona. And so I'm going to take both of these and I'm going to move them over into this drawing. So let's go ahead. We'll just, you don't have to do this, but I just like to turn all the layers off here. So I'm going to come back to my new one. I'm going to grab both of these layers and I'm going to right click on them and I'm going to say duplicate layers. And so the destination is where are these new layers going to land? And by default, it's in the document that you're currently working in. But I want to actually choose the original render here. And so I'm going to pick render 1 and say, okay. And so this is a great way to move layers around without having to drag and drop and worrying about kind of lining things up. So now, here we go. We have our new raw render 2 and the ID pass number 2 in here. So I'm going to take my ID pass and just move this to the top of the stack. And I'll take the old one here and we'll get rid of it because we don't need that anymore. This would be a great time to save. And so we're just going to save and call this one number 3, just so you don't accidentally write over your number 1 render that you've spent all that time on. Okay, so we've got the render in here. And so now I'm just going to repeat those steps. I'm going to right click on this render and I'm going to say convert to smart object. And so now it becomes a smart object. But now what I can do is I can take the filtering from the original layer and I can just drag and drop it right onto render number 2. And now all of that same tonality work has carried over. And I don't have to try to guess. I don't have to write down what the values were on a scrap of paper. It's just all right there for me. So we can get rid of this original layer now because we don't need that anymore. And so now I can just turn on my other layers here and we should be pretty close to being back where we were. And now we have this new piece of scenery, this new sculpture in the render. And so this just makes it really easy to non-destructively keep slipping renders in as you're working on the process. There's one more thing that we have to fix, and that is our statue color. So our statue color is still masked to the old statue here. And so that's not really helping us here with Henry Moore. And Henry Moore looks a little green to me and looks like we could use an adjustment. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to grab the statue color. And again, I'm going to hold Control and backspace. And that's going to fill that whole mask layer with black. Oops, I got it wrong again because my colors have reversed here. So I'm going to hit Alt backspace. And I'm going to fill with the background color. So Alt backspace fills with the foreground color, Control backspace fills with the background color. But of course, it depends on which one you have in which position. So our statue color is black, so it's not affecting anything now. Now I'm going to turn on the ID pass. And so this is just rendered out in Cinema. And it allows me to grab the magic wand tool and very easily with one click, just select parts of the rendering that I want to work on and affect, right? So we'll grab the statue here. And now I can turn this off. I'm going to come back to my mask. And now I want to fill with white while I have the selection made. So again, we'll try Control backspace. And so now what we've done is we've added the mask. So this hue saturation layer is now only affecting the new statue, which is great. And now I can come in here and dial this in any way that I want here. So like I think I want to desaturate this a little bit and maybe just play around with kind of bluing this out a little bit. So now we're all set here. If this was feeling a little dark and I wanted to do a level adjustment to it, I can also just hold control and click on the mask for the hue sat, and it's going to give me my profile back here, my selection. And now I'm going to come into adjustment and say levels. And so now we can come in here and kind of play around with the tonality, the values of the actual statue. And that was really easy for me to kind of make that selection. And again, this has all been non-destructive here, right? So we're back where we were. We were able to change out a major part of the set. And with minor work, we could kind of update to fit it. And we didn't have to change or kind of rethink about any of these other values. This is the beauty of the non-destructive workflow. So this bigger philosophy can also work while we're in production and we're making things inside of 3D. This is a play called Good Grief, designed by Jason Artizone West. And the set has a lot of moving parts, and we had to create a lot of different renders based on different positions of the same scenery. So working in a modular fashion is going to help us stay organized and make our revisions easier down the line when we get to Photoshop. Let's take a look. So here we are inside of Cinema 4D looking at that same project. And the way this is set up is that all the different looks are in their own folder. So I can turn things on just in big buckets to kind of transition through the show. So here we are in the first look, and I've got, number 1 turned on here. And so inside of that, I've got my panels in their place, and I've got the figures where I want them with their side lights. But then I can turn this whole look off and now come to number 2 and turn this on, and we've got a completely different setup. And so things stay kind of in these modular buckets that way. And at any time I can come back and kind of reinstate the look and the lighting without having to kind of repurpose the equipment. It definitely is a doubling up of objects, and on complex scenes that can be problematic. But on this simple show, this was kind of the easiest way for us to kind of think about it. And then, anything that's kind of permanent will live here outside of those objects. So those things just kind of stay. And I worked this way for a long time, but now I have found a better way to do these kind of multiple looks. And that's using what Cinema 4D calls the takes system. So if we were to jump over to another project here, this is Sam Smith's The Thrill of It All tour, designed by Jason Sherwood. What I've done is we've got our regular kind of cinema setup here with the set and the audience. We're in an arena, got lighting. But what the take system does is the take system lets us use kind of one version of all the geometry and the lighting and the materials. And then in each take, we can customize it and it records it. So it's very similar to a saved view inside of Vectorworks. So here is look 1, and then I would render this scene out. And then if I switch to a different take, now you can see that the lighting has changed. I've added different materials to the glowing kind of scenery. And as we kind of progress through the different renders, I'm just changing the position and the materials of these objects and saving them per take to give us a whole kind of different look. You can even change the camera that you're using inside of it. And this just keeps you from doubling, tripling, quadrupling up the geometry, and lets you kind of keep manipulating the same pieces over and over again. So this is great. The issue with this is that you have to kind of stay organized and stay on top of it, where it's really easy to, mess this up. So here's a much simpler scene for us to kind of take a look at. By default, your scenes always have a main take. So even if you don't, here's the setup for this scene. It's just really simple. Even if you don't use takes, you're automatically working in the main take, whether you know it or not. It's just always there. And so when you're building stuff, when you're texturing it, modeling, moving stuff in from other software, you always want to do that in the main take. And that's really like your load in, your working kind of thing where you're going to modify it. And then all the other takes are where you're just going to move the position or change the material or the visibility of these objects, and you're not going to alter them or change them because the changes will carry through kind of globally. And so you just want to be really careful about where you're working when you're in the scene. So here you can see I've just got this little simple stage, a video wall, some truss and some lighting. And then if I go to the first take here, you can see that we've changed the position of the movers. And then if I were to go to the third take, you can see that we've added a riser, we've added a drum kit, and we've changed the graphics on the LED screen. And actually, I think the movers have changed here as well. So how do we do this? So I'm going to go back to the main take here. They have it's the same icon as the camera in Cinema 4D, where you're just kind of using the crosshair to choose which take you want to make active. So I'm going to go back to the main take, and I'm just going to hit the plus sign here to make a new take. So now we have a new take, and I'll just call this EA01. Not sure what we're going to do yet. So now you can see that we have this lock override on here, which just means that if we come to any of these objects, so let's come to, I don't know, let's start with the riser here, which is in the main take, it's turned off, so it's hidden here. And so in this take now, if I want to play around with the visibility of that take, it's grayed out, right? Because I've got everything locked in here. So we need to manually override that so that in this specific take, we can update it. Takes a little while to get used to this. So I'm going to come back here. I've come to the riser. I'm in the basic tab where it's showing me viewport visibility and render visibility. So basically these are the same as these traffic lights. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to right click on these and I'm going to choose override. And then same thing with the render visibility. I'm going to right click on it and I'm going to choose override. And so now in this specific take, I have unlocked these options. And so I can come in here and change it. And so now we've turned on the riser. And if we wanted to, what else should we do here? Let's do the same thing again for the drum kit so you can see it. So I'm still in this take here. Let's come up to the drum kit and let's just right click and say override. And let's come down to the render visibility and say override. And then we'll turn these on. So now we've turned on the drum kit in this take, but maybe we want to kind of position it differently. So I'll click on the drum kit and come to its coordinates. And you can see, right, because of the lock in the take, everything by default is grayed out. But if I were to right click on any of these properties for rotation and say override, now this has become open to me. And so now I can spin the drum kit around and let's say 197 degrees, this is where we want this in the take. So now this setup is locked into this take. So if I were to come back to movers 90, those objects are off and you can see the lights are in this position. But now if I come back to our new take, then you can see that we've updated this. And so we've turned the visibility on and we've changed it. And now if you say like, oh, you know what? In this scene, we want to actually move the drums kind of off to the side. No problem. We can keep editing this. So I'll come back to the coordinates and I'm going to right click. When I did rotation, I clicked on the H. And when I did that it unlocked just the hull parameter. But if I actually click on the P for position instead of just X, I can unlock all three of these at the same time, which can be handy. And so now here we'll just move the drum kit over to the side to change that. And then the one last thing I want to do is I've got this glowing ring on the floor here. Why don't we change the color of that so you can see how we do that? So now I'm going to come back to the floor ring here, and I'm going to click actually on the tag that's attached to the floor ring. And so if we come in here under tag, you can see the material here is set to this LED kind of bluish color. So, right, I'm on the floor ring and I clicked on the tag. And now the material here is grayed out because of the take lock. So I'm going to right click on this and I'm going to say override. And then I can just drag my new material in. And now we've got this kind of yellowy orange color on the ring. And so if you come back here, you can see here's our first setup. Well, here's our second setup, and now here's our new setup. And so all this stuff keeps moving based on all of that. If I want to change out the drum set, if I want to add more band equipment, if I want to move the bass position of the lights around, I have to remember to come back to the main take so that I can kind of work in here like a load-in situation and edit all this stuff. And so then the things that I change here, if I add scenery, then this will carry down through all the other takes. If I add something while I'm in a take, it will only live in that take. And that's where you start to really screw up your file. You can turn off this lock and just open up all the properties to overrides. I just think that on complex shows, the possibility of screwing something up very high. So I don't recommend that. The other thing is that there is this thing called auto take. And if you turn this on, you don't have to do that step of like overriding stuff. All you have, anything that you do will automatically get recorded as part of the take. So you make a new take and then you just turn stuff on, you move it, you change it all around. And that's fine, but again, I just think the possibility of screwing something up there is very, very high. So I usually don't use this. The act of having to pick something and to actually right-click on it and say override, to me, that lets me kind of control and make sure that I'm only affecting the things that I want to. So then the last thing I'll say about takes is you can eliminate takes, you can delete them, you can reposition them and rename them. And you can also choose, I don't have any cameras set up in this scene, but you can choose here, if you had cameras, it would show you the list of cameras here. And even if you have different render styles, you can pick those as well. And one thing that's nice is you can say render all takes. So this also will kind of work like a batch render or like a publish in Vectorworks, where you can set up multiple scenes, have multiple cameras, and with one click, you can kind of go through and have it render all of those scenes out for you. So that's pretty handy to know. So I hope you'll think about putting some of these ideas into your workflow. For long-range development projects, it's really essential to keep things consistent and moving forward. And even for short turnaround projects where revisions come into play, it just makes your life so much saner. Nobody likes revisions, but it's just a reality, and pretty much every rendering I do has to be tweaked or changed or updated in some fashion. So I think it's better to embrace it and work right from the beginning in a way that's going to set you up for success and make your life better. And all of those things are definitely going to improve your renders. All right, everyone. Thanks for tuning in. I will see you in the next tutorial.